What is going on, YouTube? Gabmus here, and welcome to the first episode of TechPills Weekly live stream. So, first of all, I'm sorry for last week. Unfortunately, I had a pretty unsolvable issue with OBS, but we're gonna talk about that. So first off, I want to thank everyone that's here right now. Thank you for being watching right now. So I think we can move on to the first topic of today, and we're talking specifically about OBS. So uh, first off, I wanted to. This wasn't planned, but I wanted to touch on what the problem was with OBS last week that made it impossible for me to actually do the live stream. So let's actually talk about that. So the problem here is apparently there is a bug in either OBS or Mesa or both that is preventing that is actually causing OBS to eat all of the RAM of the system. And as you see, this is a bug report I actually opened myself, and there are all the details there and what actually caused it. At the end of the day, the actual cause of the bug seems to be this. This is a bug with Mesa. 19.3, I think, is the affected version. But anyway, what happens is that when using certain resources, the system starts allocating kernel memory, and to the point that it gets out of control and basically hogs all of the RAM and crashes the system. So this is what was happening last week for me, and yeah, that wasn't fun. But at least I worked around it, at least for the time being. As you see, I'm able to do this live stream right now because I actually managed to find a decent workaround. And this workaround is using a different version of OBS from the official one. And in particular, I tried this third-party app image version, which happens to work pretty well for the most part. The only real bug that I can see, the only real bug that I can see is that the icons in the interface don't show up. So that's a bit inconvenient, but as for now, as a workaround to have my OBS installation working again, this is fine, this works, and we can move on. Now we can actually start talking about the first topic of the real first topic of today, and it's OBS and Wayland. So many people actually complain about Wayland for many reasons, and one of the reasons is that the support for screen sharing and screencasting isn't always 100% there yet, depending on the application that you're trying to use and depending on which service you're trying to work with. And the reason is that, well, basically everything that did any screen recording in Linux always relied on Xorg being there. And if you take Xorg out of the question, then there's no real implementation of screen recording that doesn't use explicitly a display server like Xorg. But things are changing, and for the, well, not for the first time, but there have been more efforts into trying to make OBS work with Wayland. And besides edge cases like me that I'm streaming, or any other person that wants to do live streams on Linux and specifically on Wayland, the use case for being able to use something like OBS on Wayland is mostly, well, if you have a business meeting and you have to do like a presentation, you're probably at some point going to need to share your screen if you want to show your presentation, or if you want to do a demo or something like that. And that's very inconvenient that it's not still possible in Wayland. But also the use case specifically with OBS is probably that if you want to record a small screencast, if you want to show a bug or some weird behavior that your application has, or I don't know, if you want to share a little clip with someone explaining something, being able to use OBS for that is very handy, and has it, and is basically given for granted in Xorg environments. But again, on Wayland, historically, it hasn't been working. Now, there have been different solutions in the past to get OBS working on Wayland, and one of the best working ones, and still somewhat actively developed, is OBS GNOME Screencast. And this is a plugin made by FZWOCH. Wouldn't want to pronounce that, but anyway, this OBS plugin just simply allows you to record your Wayland session in OBS. There are some downsides. It only does one screen at a time, or one window at a time, and as far as I know, because I've tried this a little bit, it's pretty intensive on resources, but at least it works, and it's a very nice first step. This is specifically to GNOME, as you probably can tell by the name itself, and that's mostly because GNOME actually does implement a session recording functionality in either in GNOME Shell or Mutter, but I think it's Mutter because it's the Wayland compositor and it's what's responsible for something like that. And so this plugin basically uses the built-in Mutter screen recording mechanism to pipe the video feed out to OBS. There have also been other attempts at doing OBS screen recording in Wayland other than in GNOME, and one of the most noteworthy ones is WL Robs, which is a pun with WL Roots, which is a compositor protocol for Wayland compositors. And WL Robs is very simply put, allows you to record your screen in OBS in desktop environments that use WL Roots, like for instance Sway, which is the most noteworthy one. And if you don't know what Sway is basically the i3 window manager, but ported for Wayland. It's a whole other project. It's not directly related to i3, but it's basically the same thing, same concept, and they use compatible configuration files with i3. So if you're using something like Sway, here you have your solution. But if you're hoping to have a proper unified solution to Wayland screen recording that doesn't rely necessarily on GNOME, then the work that what was I saying? Okay, so the work that George Stavrakas is doing. Sorry if I butchered your name, but basically this is a GNOME developer that started working on a proper implementation of GNOME screen sharing for OBS and Wayland. And this is very nice because this even works inside of Flatpak, which is pretty interesting by itself. But it's using the XDG portals to actually be able to ask the system for the screen resource. And as you see in this photo here, this is actually happens when you initialize the plugin. The system takes over, and it knows it's been asked to share the screen, and it lets you choose if you either want to share an entire screen or a single window, which is something that other screen sharing apps like Discord or most VoIP apps allow you to do. And having this option actually built into the system is very interesting, and it's definitely the way to go. All right, we made it through the first topic. I think we can now move on to the second one, which is Zorin 15 Lite and how to care about the Linux desktop. So I'm not very much a fan of Zorin OS. I do appreciate the work that they're doing because they're trying to push the Linux desktop forward, and that's always a very nice thing in my book. I don't really like the company, the approach that they take, and the business model behind their company, but it doesn't hurt anyone directly. So even though I don't like the approach that they have as a company, I can appreciate the work that they're doing, especially with Zorin OS 15 Lite, which is what it seems to be. It's Zorin OS, so the usual Ubuntu-based distribution with a very familiar Windows-ish desktop environment configuration, but this time they're not using GNOME as their core and ultimate spins of the distribution, but they're using XFCE. And if you know XFCE, you know it's a very lightweight desktop environment, but at the same time, it's also considered one of the ugliest out of the box. And I can definitely see the argument there. Me, myself, I like using GNOME. One of the most important reasons is that I really enjoy the design that the GNOME team is doing, and the consistency of the desktop, to the point that I've been using, after so long, I'm using the stock window theme and icon theme. So it's important to have a good looking desktop. Not for everyone maybe, but for some people it does matter. And what Zorin OS 15 Lite does is bringing to the end user, a very usable XFCE powered desktop that's also lightweight and beautiful to look at. It's not as fancy as something like, I don't know, Plasma or even GNOME with some extensions can be fancy. This isn't fancy. This is functional and familiar. And the nice thing, and the one thing that I really like, is that they are using a uniform design language throughout their distros. So either you have Zorin OS Core, Ultimate, or Lite, or even I think they have an education spin. It's gonna look the same, and they also included the same eye candy features that they included in their base distributions, like the theme manager. And the fact that the theme can change throughout the day, depending on like the sun time, and when the sun sets, it changes to the dark theme and stuff like that. It's all included in this XFCE spin, which is fantastic. And as you see here, they're also using some GNOME applications, since their main desktop environment is actually based on GNOME. And they use the same applications with the same header bar and design aesthetic, and I think that works in XFCE as well. At the end of the day, XFCE is just a desktop environment. You can build on top of it with whatever you want, and the final result, in my opinion, is very nice. And one other thing just worth mentioning is that they also included support for both snaps and flatpaks in their distribution, which is nice for software availability, but at the same time, I don't know about that, because the thing about these new package managers is that they're not always intuitive to the end user. I mean, let's just take something like Ubuntu, for example. You have your software store and you just want to install some programs, so you just look for it in the store. And what happens more often than not is that, say, I want to install Steam, and I just open the store and type Steam, and I see three entries for Steam. And why is that? Why? Well, because one entry is in the repos, one other entry is a snap, and the other entry is a Flatpak. And that doesn't work for the end user. That's the thing that I'm mostly concerned about here. It's gonna confuse people, and we all know that the snap or the Flatpak version of, like, again, Steam is a great example, have some quirks, and they don't always work right as the normal repo version. So you are putting yourself in a position as a distribution to need to tell people, no, you actually need to install this thing from here, but this other thing, oh sorry, but this other thing you have to install from this other package manager. And this other thing, well, that's probably better if I download the snap of it. Or like OBS, you have Mesa 19.3 and you need to use OBS. Well, you're probably better off downloading that old app image. Now, that's something that we experienced users can work with. I mean, we can work with having to juggle around different package managers and different binaries from different sources, and that's fine because we know what we're doing. But for inexperienced people, for people that don't know what they are actually doing, moving into this kind of territory is dangerous. And most importantly, when people get confused, it's when they stop trying. So if you have someone trying, I don't know, Linux for the first time, and their chance is that they're trying Zorin, or this is not an attack specifically to Zorin. I want to make this clear, because this same thing would happen for something like Ubuntu or Fedora or Arch even, or I don't know, Endeavor. I recently made a review about that, with the software store installed and with support for all three package managers: System, Snap, and Flatpak, and app images, which are, well, they don't need a store, so they're always there lurking in the shadows or something. So we also have to always consider app images in this equation. And if the first distribution that someone new to Linux tries has 3 or 4 different package managers, what are they gonna do? They're just gonna get confused and say, well, this Linux thing is for more experienced users, for nerds, or for hackers, and I don't know anything about that. I just want to use my computer. Let's get back Windows on this PC. And that's what happens, and that's how we lose user base, which is very frustrating if you ask me, because technically speaking, both Snap and Flatpak and App-Image and whatever else you want, they're technically superior package managers. They're technically superior ways to deliver software to a computer. And the fact that we are exposing so much to the user is tricky. I don't know what a good way to do this would be, but I think it's probably best to only show the user one source for a single application. This has mostly to do with GNOME software, really, because it's the main front end for well, most Linux distributions. Ubuntu, Fedora, Arch even can use GNOME software as their software center, and it's really down to how they manage it. I do something like, well, I am the maintainer of this distribution, so I know that I have snaps, flatpaks, and repo packages in my system. What I want to do is tell people, well, suggest really people where I want them to get this particular piece of software. And package maintainers already exist, maintaining packages in repos and Flatpak and Snap. It's all the same. So maybe they can add a little clause in their package. Maybe we need a more central structure to manage this. Probably I don't know, maybe PackageKit has some mechanism in it to be able to do this kind of mojo, but we need some metadata to actually suggest the user one version to install, because I know that the Flatpak and Snap versions of Steam are problematic. So when the user searches for Steam, I show him or her the repo package, and then maybe they have a menu to choose a different version if they know what you're doing. But if they don't, well, I think there should be a default option for at least the most commonly used packages. I really think that would help. Anyway, I digress, like Jay's 2 cents. But anyway, this was mostly about Zorin OS and really my appreciation for their light edition of their desktop environment and the distribution. But the multi-package manager discussion, I really needed to talk about that too. So there's that. All right, chat has nothing to say apparently. So, well, actually, there was someone asking me about my job. Oh, sorry. There we go. So Gaia Mondal asked, oh, sorry if I butchered your name, by the way, asks, can you tell us about your profession? Saw a few of your repos. Are you a sysadmin or something like that? Well, no, I'm not a sysadmin. In fact, I am just a student. As I said in my, well, I'm back video 2 weeks ago, I just moved to Milan to attend my master's degree in computer science. So I got a bachelor's in computer science already. And most of the stuff that you see in my GitLab repos are stuff that I use day to day, which can be useful or are useful to other people, like my dot files. And I have a repo with my classmates where we're doing like assignments together and managing different resources and class notes. So I also use GitLab for that, and personal projects mostly. So that's what my my repos on GitLab are all about. Debarty Party, hello, hi, thanks for joining. So yeah, I mean, I'm just a student, and throughout my student career, I've been making an extensive use of Git and various different Git platforms, and I think that's a pretty nice strategy, both for learning how to effectively use Git, and because everything that you do, at some point you're probably not gonna need it anymore, but it will be useful for some other people in the future. So having it out there, well, for yourself as a backup or as a I don't know, way to be able to record the stuff that you've done during your career, and as a means to help other people, other students out in the future, I really think it does make sense. We have some activity in the chat. So the Barty Party asks, what's your current PC configuration, distro, desktop environment, etc.? And Mirkail S says, hello. Hi there. So as for my PC right now, well, not much has changed, except for one main core component. So my current PC has, okay, let me just pull up NeoFetch here, because it's more fun that way. There we go. Okay. So I am rocking a Intel Core i7 6700K, which is overclocked to, I think I got it to 4.6, not really sure about that. At some point I may have brought it back to base clock. I don't remember. And I have 16 gigs of DDR4 RAM at I think it's 2400 megahertz. Again, not really sure. It's been a while since I bought those. And as for my operating system, I'm running Arch Linux. This is the kernel 5.3.13, but I also have installed, in parallel, I have installed the latest Git kernel, so the very bleeding edge development version of the kernel. And that's because I'm experimenting with this little puppy here. I got myself a AMD Radeon RX 5700 XT. So this is the biggest, baddest video card that AMD has right now in the market, for consumers at least. And I've had it since, I don't know, late August, probably. And I've been playing around with it with Linux support and stuff like that. And just a reminder, I only use Linux in any of my computers, so I don't have any Windows lying around. So everything I experienced with this video card since late August is and has been on this machine on Linux, on Arch Linux. And first off, I'm really proud of that, because Linux users typically don't usually have the most up-to-date hardware, but that's not all of us. I am a hardware enthusiast as well as a software enthusiast, so there's that. And just to spend a few words on my experience with the 5700 XT, it's a great card. It works great with Linux. There's Wayland support. Right now I am in Xorg because I'm recording with OBS, and as I was talking about previously, at this point still OBS and Wayland don't go together too well, and besides, together with the problems that I've been having with OBS, I didn't want to push it too hard because I really wanted to get this stream going. So there's that. Support for the video card in the early days was pretty much terrible. Most things weren't working, and we really needed to get Mesa 19.1, I think, to get some actual working stuff in as far as graphics go. As for gaming, as of Mesa 19.2, I believe, gaming has been extraordinary. This video card just rocks, and everything I threw at it just works so nicely. The only problems I've had have been with badly optimized games like No Man's Sky, which, by the way, it just broke on me like yesterday or so, and I can't seem to get it working again. I don't know, I'm experiencing some bugs, probably related to their new update that just came out. But anyway, except for broken games or games that have defects on their own, I've been having a great experience with the 5700 XT, particularly on Linux. It's just a great video card. I cannot suggest it enough. So more from the chat. Mikhail, oh come on, I cannot pronounce your names, guys, sorry. Anyway, asks, you are an advisor, which ultrabook for programmer? Well, that's a nice question. Ultrabooks and programming, typically they go hand in hand, and I'm the first one to appreciate this fact. Mostly because we programmers like to move around. We have to move around, either if we work or if we go to university, or if we like to work, I don't know, in a cafe or something. So or maybe just traveling, having the possibility to just take out your laptop in your plane or in the train and use it and get some work done while you're on the go. That's a very important thing, and also having this requires having pretty good battery life. So, first off, Ultrabook for programmers. I just want to make a very small comment before answering this question. It really depends on what you need to do and how much you need to spend. Because if you want to just do some light programming, I don't know, backend, some front end stuff, some I don't know, Python, some just stuff that doesn't really require too much power, then you can pretty much go with an Ultrabook. If you're thinking about doing some game development or graphics accelerated stuff, or again, if you're planning on using many resources depending on what you're trying to do, like if you're if you want to do serious Android or Java development, then you're probably better off looking at some more powerful machines. Not really on the gaming side, but okay, as an Ultrabook, I usually define an Ultrabook as a 13-inch lightweight, high battery life, low power consumption machine, and that's an Ultrabook for me. And if I were to do something like Java or Android Studio or game development, I wouldn't necessarily go for something like a gaming laptop, but maybe something a little bit more beefy, like a 15-inch, stuff like that. Anyway, I digress. To answer your sorry about that. To answer your question, it really depends on your budget. If you're like just under 1,000 euros, I really suggest you take a look at the Star Laptop Mark III by Star Labs. You can go to starlabs.systems, and I actually made a review of that very laptop, and it's the one that I'm using to this day, and it's really a great laptop for the price. It's powerful, the battery life is great, and they are a vendor that really cares about Linux. They ship with Linux pre-installed. They actually have a variety of different options to choose from. And I really had the possibility to see their love and passion that they put in their products and in the Linux and open source world. So I really cannot recommend them enough. But if you have like a little bit more money to spend, there are some other options. Like many people have been talking wonders about the System 76 Darter Pro. That's a 15-inch, I think, magnesium alloy machine PC, which has a great battery life and great specs. And I've heard wonders about it from reputable people that I trust, so I can pretty much tell you, if you have the money, go with that. Or again, some other options are Slimbook. Slimbook is a Spanish company that does, again, specifically Linux powered machines, and they recently announced like the Slimbook X, I think. Don't quote me on that because I don't really remember too well, but they have some new offerings as far as their Linux laptops go, and you should probably check them out. As a follow-up, you're saying I search for web and mobile development to use with Manjaro Linux. Okay, so web development is really pretty lightweight in my experience. At the end of the day, really depends on what you're doing, but because it always boils down to that. You know what you're doing. If you're a developer, you know how much power you need. But as far as web development goes, I think a pretty decent Ultrabook with like the Star laptop is pretty much fine. As far as mobile development goes, if for mobile we're talking about Android, then we're probably talking about Android Studio or something like React Native and stuff like that. Okay, mobile is tricky because depending on what you want to do, you probably are using different IDs and different plugins and different tools like, again, React Native and Cordova, and probably you want to use an emulator to test out your software if you don't want to use your own phone. And as for that, in my experience, developing for mobile has always been a pretty resource intensive task. It's not like it's the most resource intensive task you can do, but when you have a work machine, you want to have some headroom, you know. You if I want to do some Android development on a Raspberry Pi, I can do that, but I have no headroom to do that. I have no power left to open a browser or open that, or I know exactly that if I just open up a single other terminal window, the whole thing is gonna blow up. So these are really things that you develop with experience, and if you have some experience, you know what kind of limits your hardware has, and you can probably choose and make your own decisions based on that. But honestly, if you're doing mobile development, I suggest you to go with a more powerful 15-inch class machine with a proper CPU. Again, look at the Darter Pro. As far as Manjaro for your web development distribution, I think that's pretty good. I don't love Manjaro personally, because of the weird choices that they do, and the fact that they try to be they try to be to Arch what Ubuntu is to Debian, which isn't a great thing in my opinion. Arch is nice as it is, and their contaminations, while some people appreciate them, I don't really like what they're doing in some instances. In some other instances, they're doing pretty good, but I don't really like the distribution myself. I understand many people like it, and if you're fine with using Manjaro, go with it. It's really a decent distribution anyway. So, but maybe try something like, well, EndeavourOS is still pretty much too early to be used as a daily driver in my opinion. But something like Pure Arch, if you're willing to try it out, it's doable, and I have many videos in my channel actually explaining how to install Arch step to step, so maybe we'll go with that. Anyway, I think we can move on to the next topic. What do you think? So the next topic being the Librem 5, and I always end up talking about the Librem 5 when I do a live stream. I inevitably start talking about this phone because I hate it and I love it at the same time, because I love what they're trying to do. I hate the way that they're doing it. Well, I don't hate it. I understand that it's difficult to make a phone, and to make a phone like they're trying to, with free software in mind as much as possible. It's a very difficult, it's a very problematic challenge to face, and honestly, it's understandable that they're having some trouble. But anyway, I digress. Let's actually talk about the news here. So the first iterations of the Librem 5 are starting to ship to customers. And some people on Reddit actually started posting some pictures, and this guy actually did an Ask Me Anything. Well, 10 people to ask him anything about the Librem 5. And while you can read this post, you'll probably be able to look at the link. Anyway, what I'm mostly interested about are the pictures. So this is the Librem 5 on top, compared with a Google Pixel 4. Okay, just look at this picture. Just look at it. This is ridiculous. This is really, really ridiculous. Two things. Okay, it's thick, like with 3 C's. But it's okay. I'm sorry, whenever I look at this picture, I'm lost for words. This is a thick phone. I don't think I've ever seen a phone this thick. Maybe the old dumb phones, but I don't know. Anyway, it's comical in a way, if you want. It's funny, but at the same time, man, it feels good. I would love to be able to hold this thing in my hand and just to know how it feels, because I think it's gonna feel awesome. And according to this Reddit user, which name is, by the way, Cop316, the build quality is actually pretty nice, and it's comparable to a mid-range Android phone. His words, and you can see the pictures here. It does look like a, well, kind of a little bit anonymous, a little bit bland, if you want. But anyway, as far as looks go, well, they also included a handwritten note by Todd Howard, so I think that means something. And these are more pictures showing the screen and the screen usage and yada yada yada. These are the famous toggle switches to turn off camera, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, cellular, which is, I guess, one of the main selling points of this device. Anyway, my opinions on his opinions about this phone. As expected, battery life isn't great, and I kind of knew that in a way, because apparently, well, except for the software, that of course the software isn't still very much optimized because the distribution is still in a beta slash alpha state. But the main reason, in my opinion, why their battery life is not so great is the modem that you're using. You see, the modem you're using is not a modem made for phones, but actually made for IoT devices, which means it hasn't been very much optimized for power consumption. It's pretty much all free as far as the drivers go and stuff, but there's no optimization whatsoever down to the power consumption or well, put it simply, this thing wasn't built to be into a phone. It was built to stay like in a smart crockpot or something. Anyway, one other funny thing that I wanted to mention is that calls don't work. Of all things, calls don't work on a phone. That's pretty funny, at least to me. But apparently, this has to do with some bug causing some audio distortion in calls, and apparently they're already working on it, and they have disabled calls just for these reasons, because it's so distorted that it's unusable anyway. So, and well, then one of the nice things is that being a device that's basically a computer with an operating system that's, well, basically just like any other Linux distribution, the updates are very much easy, are very well, sorry. So the updates are a lot easier to deploy compared to something like an Android phone, because they're just using the package manager to deploy the updates, and they're not using some weird zip file that they have to flash to the internal memory of the device, like what happens with Android. They're just using a normal package manager. The Purism distro is based on Debian, so they're just using apt and updating from there. And this allows them to be able to push fixes and changes more quickly and in a more elegant fashion, without having the user restart their phone and waiting around for the installation to complete. So there's that. It's still, there are still problems with the Librem 5. As I said, this calls thing, the fact that it's fucking enormous, and the fact that the hardware in there is not really that great as far as like raw power goes. But anyway, I just wanted to comment on the fact that I don't think that this phone um, will be like the revolution. I don't think it will be the Linux phone. What I think is that it will be an important first step towards a bigger movement of Linux phones and Linux powered mobile devices that actually work and are comparable to like normal Android phones. And at this point, what Purism has done is really remarkable in every possible way. And even if they go bankrupt tomorrow, which I don't think they will, but even if they do, um, none of the work that they've done will go to waste because they have upstreamed all the changes that they've done to the kernel and to the software that they included. Like they upstreamed so many changes they made to GNOME apps to make them responsive. That's so great. And even the changes to the kernel, to the specific drivers for the hardware components that they're using in their phone, they upstreamed, and that's very much that's a great accomplishment. That's a great way to actually show how open source software is done. Because literally, if they go bankrupt tomorrow, we're not going to lose anything that they've done. Maybe except the hardware, but that's, I mean, hardware comes and goes, but software can stick around for much longer than hardware can. And one of the funniest thing and one of the greatest things, in my opinion, about the Librem 5 and the work that Purism has done is that if a competitor comes tomorrow with the same idea, bringing a Linux phone to the market, they can use the exact same software stack that Purism is using. And that's so great. And that's, well, not really, but that's what could happen with the PinePhone. And this segues to the next topic I wanted to discuss. The PinePhone. Hey, I see Alex, TDK Alex, aka Alessandro, old classmate back in Catania. Good luck in Milan. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. Anyway, I was talking about the PinePhone and what Pine64 have been doing in the last, well, whenever the PinePhone project started, has been good to the point of being incredible, because they're trying and they're probably managing to bring to the market a Linux phone that's close to as free as the Librem 5 is. Well, not so much, but close enough, and with as much software support as the Librem 5, for just $150. That's, I honestly don't know how they're doing it. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, they're doing it because the Braveheart edition of the PinePhone is almost here. So what Pine is doing, they're selling these like early batches of the PinePhone without any software, with possibly some hardware defects. They're saying that stuff like burnt or stock pixels are to be expected in this early batch. They're releasing this early batch for developers to actually make their ROMs, well, their distros more likely, work on the PinePhone, and to, well, any developer that's actually interested in investing in the platform for just $150. That's crazy. And I don't really know how to start here. They're delivering such a nice product to the market, at least on paper. The hardware is still mediocre at best. I mean, we know the specs. It's a quad-core Cortex A53, yada yada yada, Mali GPU, It's an unimpressive SoC, to say the least, but it works, and most importantly, it should be compatible with the upstream Linux kernel, and that's mostly all that matters in this kind of device. It's gonna have 2 gigs of RAM and 60 gigs of internal storage, expandable via microSD, thankfully, because 16 gigs is not enough for anything these days. And they're gonna have a 720p 6-inch touchscreen, which should be IPS, which is nice. They're gonna have a big old speaker and USB Type-C with support for, I think, external displays. I don't wanna. Yep, they have DisplayPort alternate mode support. So you're gonna be able to connect an external display to this device, and probably mouse and keyboard too, since it's still USB-C. Gonna have cellular, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. Funnily enough, it's gonna have Wi-Fi BGN. So they're probably not gonna have any 5 gigahertz support, which is weird for a new phone. But again, $150. I'm so torn about this device because the hardware is, again, unimpressive. It's mediocre at best, but the price is so low, and the fit and finish, at least in the photos that we've been seeing of this device, is just so great. It's possibly all plastic all around. It's possibly cheap feeling, because it is cheap at the end of the day, but it is a working, a passable Linux phone. You're gonna get this thing in your hand. If you look at the pictures, it looks like, okay, let me show you this article from CNX Software. How do I do that? All right. Okay, if you look at this picture right here, this looks like my phone. This looks like a OnePlus 5. Look at it. It's the same thing. Anyway, my point being, this is a slick device. It looks good. It's probably gonna have the same kind of support that the Librem 5 is gonna have, which is great. And I don't know. We just have to wait and see. Well, kind of. We have a video of desktop Linux apps running on the PinePhone, which is pretty ridiculous. It wouldn't be fair to show it on the stream, so just look for desktop Linux apps running on PinePhone. But anyway, there's this guy that has a I think it's a prototype, but anyway, it's a prototype PinePhone, and with Postmarket OS, which is a distribution based on Alpine Linux made specifically for phones, and it's running the Plasma Mobile GUI desktop environment, and the guy runs actual desktop applications on this thing, which is just so ridiculous. He tried running Firefox, GIMP, LibreOffice, and of course they're not usable. That's how could you expect something like LibreOffice to work on a phone? I mean, interface wise. But the nice thing is that not only they run, because this thing is actually a computer, proper computer, but they're even pretty snappy. I mean, they're not laggy or anything as I would have expected. They just work. They're just out of place because the screen form factor is wrong for the application, but they just work. This is just wonderful. We are gonna have actual PCs, actual computers that fit our pockets very soon, that can run an upstream Linux kernel with like all your normal apps that you know and love. All right, I think we can move on to the last and final topic of today, which is RADV ACO backend for AMD GPUs. Okay, what am I talking about? Basically, ACO. What is ACO? ACO is a shader compiler for AMD GPUs made by Valve, uh, specifically to address some performance issues in shader compilation for these. AMD GPUs. And Valve has, of course, been developing this into Mesa, and it's been recently upstreamed into Mesa 19.3, which means this is actually now officially part of Mesa. And what does this really mean for gaming? Well, it means having a great performance on games running with Vulkan. And if you're using maybe like a high-end graphics card, you're probably not thinking about this. You're probably thinking that, well, it's the best of the best. This hardware, how can it possibly be any better than it is? Well, let me tell you, Vulkan games in particular have always, well, not always, but often suffered from very bad noticeable stuttering, particularly in Linux. I don't know if this is a Linux specific thing or if it's a game optimization thing in general, but anyway, if you're running a Vulkan game, particularly the early ports, like I remember seeing these in the Mad Max Vulkan port and the Ballistic Overkill Vulkan version, so mostly Unity games suffer from this. But anyway, if you know what I'm talking about, you know that in these kind of games, using Vulkan, there's always a very noticeable but uneven stuttering going on. So the game is running fine, and then at some point it just drops, I don't know, a couple of frames, and just stutters, and it's really terrible to look at, and it's really frustrating considering that I spent so much money on a pretty decent and powerful graphics card, and having a game stutter doesn't really make sense at this point. And the funny thing is that I knew that it wasn't making sense because I was monitoring when this problem happened, particularly with this latest graphics card that I acquired, the 5700 XT. I was monitoring the GPU usage, and I knew that the GPU wasn't being used to its full potential when the stuttering occurred. So there was something else going on in the system that was bottlenecking the GPU, and in this particular case, it was shader rendering. And ACO actually tries to actually fix that once and for all, at least for Vulkan games. This has no support still for OpenGL games, just Vulkan. But anyway, most games today, what's released natively for Linux is Vulkan, and what's not released natively and runs under Proton is most likely running under the XVK or D9VK or VK-D3D. I always mess up this last one. But anyway, it's always some kind of conversion from some version of DirectX to Vulkan. So you're gonna have many games in your libraries actually using this ACO compiler. And what it actually does is, well, it's just a compiler, so it compiles the shaders, but it's particularly well optimized for real-time compilation, more so than LLVM is. And LLVM, which is like the default shader compiler that Mesa and most other stuff actually use to compile shaders. And the nice thing about this ACO compiler is that, of course, it's not a game changer in the sense that you're gonna get like 10 plus 10 FPS or plus 20 FPS or whatever in your game, because here we're not talking about like maximum frame rates. We're talking about frame rate consistency. And without having the system pegged, compiling shaders, stuttering because it can't keep up with how fast the GPU is, with the ACO compiler, I can tell you by personal experience, the games feel so much smoother, and it's just a whole better experience. Not because you're getting higher frame rates. I have a 60 Hz display. I cannot perceive with this monitor a frame rate higher than 60 FPS. But it's a much better experience because I'm not seeing any more stuttering anymore, and that's just great. And the fact that the Valve of all companies, actually made this thing and made it upstream is just great. It shows how much Valve cares for the Linux and open source world. I don't know if all Valve shares this feeling, but surely someone someone Valve thinks that spending money and time into Linux really makes sense, and I'm really glad to see that. So, guys, I think we reached our last topic for today, and we just broke the hour. We just made it exactly in 60 minutes. Wow. Okay, that's just perfect. So I think we're gonna end this here. This first episode of Tech Pills live weekly show thing is probably gonna end here. So guys, thank you very much for watching. How many people are live right now? 5 people. Wow. Okay. Thank you very much, guys, for watching. Thanks for being here and hearing me rambling. It really means a lot to me. And at this point, this is gonna wrap it up. Subscribe to the channel if you want more of this. Like this video if you liked it. Join the community, of course. Join the community at techpills.technology/community, or there, if you want to join the Telegram group directly, there's a QR code in here, or you can just type t.me/techpillstelegram, and you're gonna join the official TechPills community on Telegram. All right. Again, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye.